What's up, everybody? Today I'm going to be talking to you about distracted attention and a technique that you can use when life has handed you shit. This isn't something that's super relevant if you're just trying to stay focused in general. This is a technique specifically to when you are in a very extreme emotional state due to some kind of heartbreak or loss or any circumstance where the reality is there is no distracting yourself. You cannot do anything without thinking about the thing that is occupying your mind. So the trick in this state is to get out of the state without making any reckless decisions or causing yourself or anybody that you care about harm. And it's definitely hard to get out of the state. It will happen naturally with time, obviously, but ideally you want to have techniques and things that you can do to speed that process up. So what I'm going to be talking to you about is distracted attention and a way to use distracted attention in order to assist yourself when you find yourself in one of these emotional states. So before I get too much into it, let's talk a little bit about distracted attention itself. Distracted attention is the act of staying focused on something, but not necessarily the same thing. So when you're practicing distracted attention, a really good example is to use, let's use this room as an example. There is a couch, right? Then there is a guitar next to that couch, okay? Then over here, in another place, there is a chair next to a bookcase. Lots of books there, right? And then if we go over here, there's a desk with a computer, okay? So to practice distracted attention would mean that I would sit down over here and I would start to read any book, okay? When you're not in a traumatized state, distracted attention can be used to just kind of make yourself more efficient, right? You can read something for like 20, 30 minutes and then go do something else, right? Or maybe 5 or 10 minutes. But when you're in a highly traumatized state, you have to do work in order to get yourself to a point where you can do anything for more than 10 or 15 minutes. And so you can practice a minor form of distracted attention on a smaller scale. So first I'm going to talk to you about how you would use distracted attention as like a regular person. Understand we have these 3 locations, right? We have the couch with the guitar, and we have the seat I'm in right now with the books, right? And then we have the desk over there with the laptop. So if you were more regular, and by regular I mean like you didn't recently just get abused, you didn't go through anything crazy, you're just like, it's a pretty average day for you right now, right? So you might, the idea is that, all right, you have trouble doing anything for like an hour or 2 straight, but you can do things just as long as you remain interested in them, right? So in this example, you would pick a book that you're interested in, and then you would start to read it. And you would read maybe the first chapter. You would do something, a task that takes between like 5 and 10 minutes, okay? And then as soon as your brain starts to lose interest, as soon as you feel that momentum slow down, then you would get up and you would go engage with something else in a different location. So say that you were a musical person, then you could sit down and there could be chord charts on the wall that you practice, right? And so you do that just in between until you get restless, or you get to a point where you don't feel like, you lose that momentum. It's hard to articulate exactly what it feels like, but you just lose interest, right? So then you wait and then you do it again. And right now, normal person doing this, the first couple cycles you do, you're going to lose interest faster, right? So you're only going to be able to do the book reading thing for like maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then guitar for maybe 5, 10 minutes, right? And then go towards something else. Like for me, because I do so much computer work, there's always more that I can do on the computer, right? So what I tend to do is have distracted attention things that don't take up too much time, and then I end up working on the computer for as long as I'm not paying attention to the time. Because really the goal is to just lose track of time in a task. Because once you lose track of time, that indicates that you weren't obsessing about that other thing in your head. But getting to a point where you're able to lose track of time is complicated. So now that I've gone over this, I've explained that's just a brief summary of how one would use distracted attention in like regular day-to-day life. This is something that's really good for people who have problems with ADD and ADHD. Definitely a thing. I need to do a whole video about ADD and ADHD, but yeah, anyway, that's a different thing. My point, so now you understand that, okay, so there's this thing you can do where you just go from one task to another as soon as you feel like you're losing momentum. So it's not multitasking because you're not doing multiple things at the same time. You are doing multiple things over a period of time, though. And so ideally, you get in the habit of just going from one thing to the other, to the next, to the other, and then, again, because you're able to keep switching the tasks, you can lose track of time. But now that you understand that, let's talk about how you would use this concept if you are in one of those heightened emotional states where you, like, okay, for me, for example, if I think of the worst breakups I've ever been through, or the worst points in my life with my father dying, or like weird home situations, or just really strong negative emotional feelings, right? There's usually like a cyclic dialogue in my head. And if the event was related to a particular person, then usually it's some kind of conversation in my head with that person, and I'm just like really frustrated and can't get it out of my head. That's typically with breakups. Whereas for like really intense like emotional or traumatic abuse, it would be something more like just this, you're stuck in the scared, oh shit, I gotta do something state, and everything you think about, you think all the things that can go wrong and all the risks, and you can't not see all of the bad things and all the, like, you just, no matter what you think about, even if you think about something simple, then you just see all the worst sides of everything, right? When you're in that state, that really, that traumatized state. So obviously you can't, there's nothing you can do to just fix that straight away. But ultimately, what you need to do to make the situation better is, again, to be able to lose track of time doing something. Being able to lose track of time in an action, ultimately, that is what healing is. That leads to almost everything getting better. Obviously, there are bad ways to do that. Like, say that you do heroin. You're probably going to lose track of time, but that's not good. Like, that really isn't a good solution. When I say it's really important to lose track of time, I'm talking about because you're so engaged with what you're currently doing, okay? I'm not saying that it's just good to not have a sense of time. What I'm saying is that you want to find any situation where you're hanging out with people and you really enjoy it, or you're going to a particular location and just for like 5 or 10 minutes you really like that, you just forget about other things, right? You want to find as many of those scenarios as you can and figure out how to experience them more often. But when it comes to the specific moment where you are being really intense emotionally, in my experience and in my life, this is what I've done in those situations, okay? So let's go back to this distracted attention thing. Now, remember earlier, if we were just practicing distracted attention, we would pick some kind of book, and then we would read like the first chapter, right? But when you're highly traumatized for whatever reason, you aren't going to be able to do anything for more than more than like a minute without that other thing just resetting your head over and over again, right? especially if your brain still thinks you're in danger, because then it's going to be like, no, no, wait, I have to do this. No, wait, I have to, you know, it's complicated. So what you would do in that situation is you still practice the distracted attention thing, but instead of doing like, instead of the goal being to do each thing for as long as you can, you're literally identifying one single step that you can take at each station and then moving to the next one. Because the act of moving to the next station is much easier to do. And you're going to find that you can keep doing that over and over again, even if you're having a really, really hard time focusing, right? So, for example, what I would do in that scenario here is, instead of picking a book and then reading it, I would just pick a book. So I would look down here and I would find something, and then I'd be like, okay, this is the book I'm going to pick. Now I'm going to put it on the chair, and then I'm going to go to the other thing that I'm doing. And I'm just using music and books and computer as an example. You definitely want to have multiple things. You want to, like, really, like, having 4 or 5 is best. And I'll explain how you could do that in a second. But it's not super important what they are. They just have to be something relevant to you and your interests as a person, right? So then I would come here, and I haven't yet established what I'm doing at this location. So my next specific task would be like, okay, what's the goal? I need to establish the goal. Okay, the goal is to tune the guitar. I can't do anything with it until it's tuned, right? Okay, so now I know I need to tune the guitar. And at that point, I've done the one thing, right? So then I would go over here, and I would go to the computer. I'd be like, all right, what is one thing that I can do here that's going to progress something in the future or push something forward, right? So in this case, I have a bunch of Zelda Let's Plays that I never published. So I have about 20 of them. And I'm in the process of scheduling all of them and setting the publish dates so I can just not worry about it, right? So I would move forward in that. But because I'm recording, I can't show everything, so I'm not going to actually do it. But you kind of get the idea. And at this point, we've only done 3 things, but a couple other things that it's really easy to integrate, and I think actually really, really helpful, is to integrate food, hydration, and cleaning. Cleaning is important. Like, the regularity of cleaning is definitely important, and you can always integrate that into your distracted attention. So now I'm in the kitchen, right? Cleaning's great because if you live with people, there will be mess. That's just an inevitability, right? And especially if you live with children. So now what I would do is I would come over, and then I would pick the dish that is biggest. I would pick the one thing that I can do that has the most noticeable impact upon the visual noise of the room, right? So in this situation, that's the biggest dish, that Pyrex dish right there. So what I would do is I would just clean this Pyrex dish, and then I would go back to whatever the beginning task in the cycle is. And you don't have to do them in order. Like, I went book, music, computer, cleaning. That doesn't mean I then have to go book, music, computer, cleaning. You have to do whatever it is that is most interesting to you in that current moment, and understand that at the beginning, you're not going to be interested in doing any of the tasks. But as you move from one to another, then you're going to build momentum, and that is going to increase your interest with the tasks as well. So another good thing to do for this is to have some source of caffeine that isn't strong. You don't want something like coffee or espresso or energy drinks because they give you a whole lot of caffeine at once. You don't want that. What you want to do is have a certain step in this cycle that increases your caffeine by a little bit, right? So you'll have, for me, for example, a good rate to make myself moving is to have 1 cup of black tea every hour. a single cup of black tea, I can't feel that, right? But by integrating it into the routine and slowly caffeinating myself more, that helps me like keep my momentum going. And that's a kind of recurring thing about mental health. It's almost always better to ease yourself in and out of different emotional states and working states than it is to just suddenly be in one. Our minds like being eased into things and out of things. We like it when things kind of have a predictability to them, right? And in our modern age, that can be kind of frustrating. But I hope that this has helped you guys. These are just things that I've learned in my life with my experiences about how to kind of get out of my head when I'm stuck there. Because ultimately, that's kind of what depression is, really. Is when instead of living your life and being active by default, you are living in your head. And so you could be depressed and active, and you're still depressed if you're living someone else's life. But theoretically, if you are living the best life for you, and you truly feel that way, all the deeper parts of you feel satisfied and accomplished, and you're active, you're not going to be depressed. You may feel depressed sometimes. You may go through states of depression. But ultimately, I believe everybody on this planet has a blueprint, basically. And there's certain things, and if they do those certain things every day that fulfill every part of themselves as a person, then they're happy. The reality is very few of us actually have control over all of our lives. So we can't, like it takes a lot of people 30, 40 years to even figure out what that blueprint to make them happy is, let alone then gain the control over our lives to actually integrate it, right? So it's definitely not easy, and some of us have it easier than others for sure. But I've babbled on long enough. I'll see you guys in further videos. Bye-bye.